Hey everyone, Rich Gasaway here. A quick reminder about an awesome way to train your members on situational awareness that doesn't involve the expense of bringing me to your town. It's called the Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. This online academy is designed to help first responders improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making, and it'll teach your members everything they need to know for a crazy affordable price of only $97 a member. And it gets better. The pricing goes down as the number of members you enroll goes up. For example, if you enroll 31 or more members, the investment's just $49 a member. That's like half the price of a decent pair of gloves. Since the Academy opened for enrollment in January, more than 800 students have enrolled, and for good reason. Did you know that issues related to situational awareness are consistently identified as contributing factors in near miss and casualty events? Please, don't wait for your agency to have a critical injury or fatality incident. Don't wait. I work with many departments that have experienced critical injuries and fatalities, and they're some of the most hurting organizations you can imagine. I really don't want that to happen to you. Seriously, I can help your members take their understanding of situational awareness and high-risk decision-making to the level that it needs to be. Visit samatters.com, click on the green button on the right side of the homepage that's labeled Online Academy. Now, there are two enrollment levels in the Academy. For those that are in the premium level, they get to participate in monthly webinars where I have thought leaders on talking about important safety topics. Past guests have included Dave Dotson, Dennis Rubin, Chris Naum, Doug Klein, Joe Pernesti, Ron Canterman, John Murphy, Dan Sheridan, and more. Again, these webinars are exclusively for the premium enrolled students, and for those students, there's a playback available in the course room if they miss the live event. Okay, that's enough of the pre-show stuff. Roll that podcast intro. Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
This is Lieutenant Jared Sergi from Norfolk Fire Rescue, and you are listening to the SA Matters radio show with Dr. Rich Gasaway. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 183 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision making for individuals and teams who work in high risk, high consequence, time compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. Did you know I've been sharing this message on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making in live events for more than 12 years now and have trained over 59,000 students, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, aviation workers, and more. Really, this message is for anyone who works in an environment that is high risk, high consequence, time compressed, with changing conditions. If you or someone you know could benefit from training on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making, ask them to reach out to me by visiting samatters.com and clicking on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage. If you're new to this podcast, you got some homework to do by going back and listening to past episodes. I've released a new episode of this podcast every Tuesday, never missed a week for over 3 years. No other podcaster focused on improving worker safety even comes close to that track record. And I do this for you, the listeners of this show. You truly inspire me. And let me say this, I'm here for the long run. For so long as I'm able, I will continue to share this message, a message of hope, a message of inspiration, and a message of encouragement for anyone who works in a high-risk environment. I want to make sure that you know how to develop and maintain your situational awareness, and you know how to make quality, high-risk decisions. I'm dedicated to improving your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important goal of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you. And speaking of sharing the message, I'm coming to you today from beautiful Antwerp, Belgium, where I'm in town to deliver 3 full-day situational awareness training programs for members of the Antwerp Fire Brigade and other fire brigades throughout Belgium, as well as business leaders and industrial workers. Tomorrow's program is being hosted by the Belgian Federal Center for Expertise for Civil Security. And all of this is part of a month-long international tour that I've been doing. So far, over the past 3 weeks, I've done programs in Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Australia, and Perth, Australia, including a keynote for the Institute of Fire Engineers Australia branch. Then I was in Wellington, New Zealand, Christchurch, New Zealand, and Auckland, New Zealand, including a program for the Institute of Fire Engineers New Zealand branch. And then I moved on to Amsterdam, where I did 3 programs for fire brigades throughout the Netherlands. A few weeks ago, I did a program in Evansville, Indiana, and Evansville Fire Chief Mike Conley did an amazing job of getting program sponsors. He was able to host a 2-day program that cost his department nothing. Nothing. He did it all with sponsors. I tell departments all the time it's a great way to host training events, mine or someone else's, is to do it with sponsorships. Usually the suggestion is met with skepticism, but not in Chief Conley's case. He just said to me, show me how, and I showed him how, and then he went out and he got sponsors, and then he came back and told me that wasn't hard to do. Sponsors for the Evansville program included Vectren, that's the gas and electric utility that serves Evansville and other regions of Indiana, Deaconess Hospital, University of Southern Indiana, Evansville Firefighters Credit Union, Old National Bank, Global Emergency Products, Hoosier Fire Equipment, Mission Barbecue, Public Safety Medical, and Siegel's Uniforms. When the dust settled on his efforts, he was able to raise $15,000. That paid for the program, a situational awareness book for every attendee, the venue rental, lunches for every attendee, and because all of that added up didn't total to $15,000, he now has seed money that he can use for a future program. How cool is that? I tell departments all the time with limited budgets that this is the way to go, and it is. If you want to host a program and you have limited resources, contact me, and I'll help you do what Evansville did. Host a program that will cost your department little to nothing. I always say where the will is strong, a way can be found. And folks, training on this topic, situational awareness and high-risk decision-making, it's a game changer. How do I know? Because the attendees tell me. They tell me at break, they tell me at lunch, they tell me at the end of the day, they send me emails, they post on my social media, they post on their social media. Understanding how to develop and maintain situational awareness can truly, and I mean truly, save your life. There is no simpler way to say it. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, when are you coming to my area? Or where are you going to be next? Great questions, really easy to find out. I've created a link right on the home page of my website called Upcoming Events. It's the blue box on the right side of the home page. Just click on that and it'll take you to all the upcoming events. Here's something else you could benefit from. If you know I'm going to be somewhere in your region, if you see on that upcoming event schedule I'm going to be within a few hours of you, contact me and ask about being a companion. A companion program is a program on an adjoining day to an existing program. And you can save as much as 20% off the program cost by being a companion. And I've done over 100 of those and no one's ever complained about saving money. That's what I call a win-win. In today's feature segment, it's going to be part 1 of a 3-part interview. That's new for me, doing a 3-part interview, but this one is absolutely amazing. Oh my gosh. I had on the show 2 members of the St. Charles, Missouri Fire Department. And they're going to talk about a significant near-miss event they had on January 3rd, 2014 at a single-family residential dwelling fire on Nancy Drive. Captain Chip Ashford and Battalion Chief Dan Casey share the events as they unfolded. The thermal assault endured by these firefighters resulted in injuries that included second and third degree burns. One firefighter even lost part of an ear, and a shoulder injury from a bailout, and that firefighter's been off work for over 3 years now. When I'm done with the feature segment, stick around and I'll tell you where you can attend an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop event. Who knows, maybe I'll be right in your state or right in your county soon. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Situational Awareness Matters podcast. And I am super excited today because I have a couple of guests with me that are going to share a very significant near-miss event that they had in St. Charles, Missouri in January of 2014. But before we dig too deep into the details of it, guys, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourselves?
I'm Dan Casey with Battalion Chief with the city of St. Charles Fire Department. Been here about 19 years, started out as a volunteer back when I was 18 years old. That volunteer department kind of went combination, was with them for about 10 years. Became a paramedic and got on with the city back in 1997 and been there ever since, kind of worked my way through the ranks a little bit. So it's been exciting.
How long have you been a battalion chief?
Just been a battalion chief a little over a year.
Okay.
So we've had a lot, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We've had a lot of turnover because of we had a buyout, worked for a municipal department, so bought out all the older guys, and so we had to move some folks up, and it kind of plays into the situation that we had. So. Okay.
Chip?
Yeah, my name's Chip Ashford. I'm a captain with the City of St. Charles Fire Department. I've been there almost 10 years now. I work for the City of St. Louis, which is, we're about 20 miles west of St. Louis City. I worked there for about 10 years. Same way as Dan, I started out as a volunteer and, started working there and came out to St. Charles. Because of that buyout that Dan's talking about, that's when I got promoted 3 years ago, and that's one of the things we talk about. We lost 10 captains at once out of the 15. So, it's a big change in the department, along with, I think we're now up to 35 guys out of 75 that we've lost in the last 3 years. So, but yeah, so I've been there about 10 years. I've been an instructor, about 5 or 10 years now. That's kind of where we're at.
Okay. When do you guys take a swing at telling us about the demographics of St. Charles as a city and then the fire department?
Yeah, so St. Charles City, we're about 75,000 people overall now. We've had a pretty big change in the last 15 years in our demographics and how much we've grown. Last I heard, talking to the chief, we're pushing about 120,000 people at our daytime population, which is a big change. Plus, and that's not including the 20,000 at Lindenwood University. That doesn't really count in our population, so that that change is pretty regular. We're 24 square miles. Right now, we're running 5 stations, 3 engines, 2 75-foot quints, 2 ALS ambulances, 1 brush truck, which Dan and I joke about it all the time. It's not really a brush truck; it's more of a casino parking garage car fire truck. We don't really have any wildland. And then a couple of boats. We are 1 big fire rescue boat, which is a Boston Whaler. We run a pretty good chunk of the Missouri River and parts of the Mississippi River. So truly we are, and we talk about it, we are an all hazards fire department because we run everything from, we got guys on the Missouri Task Force 1 to all the water rescue stuff we do because of the rivers. We're a big part of the countywide hazmat team. We run this last year. I think we ran almost 10,000 calls, which was our first for us. That's a big struggle that we deal with. We're a city department. We struggle like everybody else, doing more with less. In 1990, we built Station 5, which the department was doing about 3,500 runs. Last year, we did right at 10,000 with the same amount of manpower. So we've had a pretty big change in our, increase in our department. We're running the fire chief, a deputy chief, 3 shift battalion chiefs, and 72 line personnel. We lost 2 years ago, part of that buyout and everything. We lost our EMS chief and training chief to budget cuts. So now, unfortunately, Dan and Tim Cooper and Tim Wershing are all having to do all of that work plus run a shift. Dan is our logistics special operations chief. Tim Wershing is the training chief, and then Tim Cooper's EMS chief on top of running their shift. So there's some struggle there, things that we're dealing with. We average, we're an average department. We average about 40 to 50 working structure fires a year. And then, like I said, getting into the heavy rescue task force and the hazmat team and all that, one of the things we talk about in class definitely is the fact that we were at a very unique time. And, after 9/11, everybody got really big into the USAR stuff and hazmat and that all hazards mentality. Unfortunately, we forgot what we were really there to do, and that's be firemen and be paramedics and run calls. And we had a lot of older guys, and this is where, you and I have talked before with the situational awareness and complacency and all those things that happened, that we were really at a point in time where we had a lot of older guys in the department. When you talk about, hey, let's go pull lines, or let's throw ladders, I don't need to do that. I've been doing this 30 years. I don't need to do that stuff anymore. I got all this USAR stuff to do, and I got all this other stuff that's keeping me busy. And, unfortunately, it came back to bite us on January 3rd.
Okay.
When we talk about like the demographics and stuff, we've got everything from low income to $1 million homes, and we've got the Boeing plant and Coca-Cola. We've got a lot of industry and a lot of residential. So it's a good mix, and a lot of folks come here. They want to work with us because of that. We have a lot of low income, high income, and a lot of industrial stuff. So we got a little bit of everything here. We've even got our big Main Street area. We've got a casino down there. It's the first state capital here in St. Charles. So it's really actually a pretty city. So we enjoy working.
Good. On the day of the fire, Chip, what position were you in on the day of the fire?
I was a private with the city of St. Charles. I actually was off that day, getting into this and sort of the class and everything that we've put together. Dan was the PIO that night, which he can talk about a little bit. He was there. But, when we went out and started trying to promote this a little bit and talk to other departments, we wanted to be very open and honest about it. A lot of departments, we were talking about it earlier, tend to hide this stuff and sort of sweep it under the rug and, we just don't want to talk about it. It never happened. We'll just make it go away. And, a lot of senior guys like Dan Casey and other guys really made a big deal out of this. No, we're not going to let this one go. Like, we have to talk about this. And we almost lost 4 guys that night. We have to talk about it. So when Dan started looking at the class, I think one of the reasons why he asked me to help is because me not being there, I was able to be very neutral and open in discussions. And how it could tend to be if a guy from that shift is there and somebody starts questioning, they get very defensive and, it can kind of get standoffish. So it gives me the ability to step back, look at what happened, pick it apart, and be very neutral about talking about it, and, versus being there. So.
Okay. And Dan, you were the PIO that night. Does that put you in an admin vehicle to the scene then?
Right. I had, as a PIO for the department, I respond to any working incident, any large incident. This particular night, I kind of hesitated a little bit, actually, because of the snow. We had 10 inches of snow on the ground. It was we had a -9 degree wind chill. So things were not pleasant, so to speak. I actually waited about 5 or 6 minutes, and they said it was a working fire. So I thought, I might get some good photos and, the icicles hanging on the helmet, stuff like that. And I thought when I actually on my way there listening to the radio traffic, because I do have a radio, obviously, on my way there, and listening to that, I thought, well, heck, this fire is out. I'm not, by the time I get there, it's going to be out. I'm not going to get any of those pictures. So I almost turned around. And then they had called for 2 additional pumpers, and I thought, I wonder why the heck they're doing that.
Okay, let's not get that far yet.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far too soon until we frame up the incident. So let's talk about just that day, the 3rd of January 2014. We know there were 10 inches of snow on the ground. We know it was -9 with the wind chill. What was the day like otherwise, as far as how busy it was? Was there any other fires that day? What was the staffing on duty for the day? That kind of stuff.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, go ahead, Chip, and explain that.
No, I think one of the big things as far as the weather goes that really happened that day, and when we get into it, you'll understand it, is the wind chill, and we talk about the 10 inches of snow. There was it was 17-mile-an-hour sustained winds with a 40-mile-an-hour wind gust that night. And it was a typical, St. Louis winter day where you have a storm coming in like that. Everybody was, Stormageddon 5000, milk, bread, and eggs, and the stores were everybody's busy getting out to the store and going on lockdown. But that night, when this fire happened, that storm had just come through. All that snow was fresh. It had just dumped it there. So then you get all that wind that pushes in behind it, and eventually when we get into this, you'll see how that plays into it. But Dan can talk about kind of the staffing and that.
Is that kind of weather normal for you guys, or would you call it an unusual weather event?
No, that's pretty. I mean, that's a normal. It doesn't happen every day in St. Louis, but it definitely, you expect it in the wintertime. We have our ups and downs. Like this last year wasn't nearly as bad. We had some 60-degree days in February, but then January we had -10. So that's one thing we joke about St. Louis is if you don't like the weather, just wait an hour and things will change.
Yeah, it's typical. We don't get you get a big snow like that once every couple of years. You really don't get big snows like that. I would say it's not unusual to get snow, but I think last year we had a total of 2 inches altogether or something the whole season. So it was bad.
To pick up on your joke, Chip, here in Minnesota, like in November when it snows, we say if you don't like the weather, wait till May, it'll change.
Right. I'm sure.
Yeah. I think we did. We had 70 degrees in February this year, I think.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I'm living in the wrong place. All right. So take me through the dispatch of the call. How did it come in? What was reported? What were the crews en route being told? All the way to first on scene, size up, initial operations. Just kind of like.
Well, you gotta remember, it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday in the wintertime. So what's on Sunday, right? Football Sunday, right?
Right.
And in Wisconsin, I guess I got this team called Green Bay or something. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Minnesota, we don't talk about Wisconsinites.
Oh, it's Minnesota. I'm sorry, my bad. Was I did I do that on purpose? I don't think so.
Yeah. Nice try on the joke.
Now you just got me in trouble with
northern states. I don't know.
You just got me in trouble with every Wisconsin listener. They've now just unsubscribed from my podcast.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I better let Chip talk.
Yeah.
Oh, crap.
The Vikings.
No, yeah, the Vikings.
Yeah, so, all right, so it's Sunday night. Football's on. Vikings are losing. Nobody's watching that game.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, and, we talk about it, and I'm sure we'll get into it at some point. We had a chance to interview these guys after the fire. And the four guys this happened to really are good friends of Dan and I, and we spent a lot of time talking to them, especially putting this class together. And Matt, if you get a chance to ever see the class in his interview, Matt is very open and honest about what happened. He's pretty candid about it. It's like sitting around the firehouse with him. But and what Dan was alluding to is, we talked to Matt afterwards. He's like, I'll be honest with you, it's football Sunday. He's like, we had a couple of runs. We were coming from another run instead of being at the firehouse. So we were coming in a different direction than what we normally would, and we talk about the domino theory throughout this entire class. And every small thing leads up to the big event. And that's that first sort of small thing. We're not at the firehouse. We're in the truck already. We're coming from a different direction, all those things. But Matt says, he's like, this is a regular residential house fire. No big deal. Should have been in and out in 45 minutes. And he's like, honestly, it crossed my mind. Like, hey, we need to hurry up. I want to get back and watch football and hang out. And, my mind was just not where it should have been, because it was that every day we do this all the time. Bang, bang, bang. Let's get in and get out.
Yeah, when we talk about dispatches and things like that. I'm sorry, I'm going to let you go, Chip. I'm going to take this real fast.
No, you're fine. So as far as the way the call came in, it actually came in at 1845 was the time that, and it was reported as a single-family structure fire. Originally, it was reported as a flue fire, which is one of the next dominoes that played out into this. So it comes in as a flue fire. They're dispatched. They're headed in. It's a full first alarm complement, which at the time for us was 5 companies. That night, it just happened to be that 3 ladder companies were the closest units to the scene. We use GPS dispatching. So you got 3 ladders, 2 engine companies, and 2 ambulances, which for us, we send 1 St. Charles City ambulance, which those guys work as firefighters coming off the ambulance. And then we sent 1 St. Charles County ambulance, which they do our EMS and rehab at the scene. So they were responding. 9432, which is two of the victims in this, arrived on the scene at 1851. Matt gave a great size up. He reported a 2-story residence with heavy smoke coming from the attic. And it played into it. It came in as a flue fire. He pulled up, found heavy smoke coming from the attic. Him and his driver, he talks about in this interview, they even had the conversation of where to position the ladder because they may have to get to the roof. There's a lot of snow on the roof. We want to work off the aerial ladder. But they were thinking they were going to have to get up, ventilate the attic and start working a flue fire. He does a good job, gets out, does a 360 to the building. As he's doing that, he comes across the residents who are hiding in the garage. And they say, no, hey, the fire's in the basement. He says, what? The fire's in the basement? They're like, yeah. So he says he walks around to the back of the building and looks in the sliding glass door. It's not a walkout. It's a peek out basement. He looks in the sliding glass door of the rear of the building and looks down and says he sees 2.5 to 3 foot flames pushing out of the floor registers on the first floor. So now he knows he has a basement fire. He communicates that very well and lets everybody know over the radio what's going on and starts to play it out from there. But, again, it's just another one of those dominoes, you're as things start to pile up, and we went back and listened to the dispatch tapes. That it was actually communicated over the phone on the 911 call that the fire was in the basement, but it just never got communicated to us.
What's the staffing on the first and engine?
So
or ladder?
Basically the way, yeah. So that night it was 3 guys. Okay. Typically what our department works is we staff with 4, we work down to 3 with vacations. So any given day, so like that night, first in company had 3, second in company had 4, third in company had 3. I believe the incoming units after that all had 3 as well. So, it just varies on who's on vacation and how things are going for that day on what's happening.
Right. Okay. Keep going.
So they arrived at 1845. Like I said, he does a good size up. At that time, at 1854, the battalion chief arrives on scene, 9406, who takes command. And unfortunately, there's a couple of things that happened in this incident, really 2 big ones. One is with the battalion chief, typically they park in front of the building. They'll either, pull up in a driveway, park right in front, wherever they can still see the building and run command from the vehicle. At the time, we were running it from the back of the vehicle, which we've now changed since then. But, they would run out of the back. They had a couple of radios, a computer back there, all that stuff. Well, that night, because of the 10 inches of snow, a snowplow had just come through. So you got that single track going down the middle of the street. You got trucks coming in. Things are starting to get laid out and stacked up with the vehicles. He actually ends up having to park 2.5 houses away, which is something we never do. He does a good job, gets out, does his own 360, kind of starts to lay the things out. And when you listen to radio traffic, he does a really good job throughout the entire incident of how he lays things out and giving orders. But there's some drops in communication that happen that, it's that closed loop communication doesn't happen and a couple of assignments don't get done. Well, the problem is he's 2.5 houses away. He can't see when those assignments don't get done. He can't see some of the condition changes and some of the things that are going on, and guys aren't communicating very well on what's going on.
Yeah,
which leads to the big incident at some point. So at about units continue to arrive on the scene. They enter the building on the alpha side, go through the front door. They have to go in on the first floor. Matt and Dave do a good job of finding the basement steps right away.
Okay, hold on. Describe the house for me.
Okay, so it's a typical 2-story residence. Most people have them. It's a wood frame. It's conventional construction, so it's real wood and nails and everything holding it together. It's not lightweight construction at all. So we knew we had time to operate in a building. Just a 2-story single family, about 2,000 square foot. Like I said, it's got a peek out basement, no walkout. So they had to make access, from the first floor and go down into the basement. It's got an attached garage on the Delta side that faces out to the street. That's where the family was actually hiding from the weather, trying to stay inside the garage. And Dan, you can talk about what they told you when they called the family.
Oh yeah, well, initially the caller, from talking to him, he said they were sitting around in the living room area watching television with the the fireplace going, and they noticed some smoke was kind of coming between the floor and the hearth of the fireplace. And he said they got up, and he said just about that time somebody came out of the basement. So there's actually somebody in the basement, which is where the origin of the fire was, come out of the basement and said, hey, the basement's filling up with smoke. And he said just about that time the lights went out. So here we are, and where the fire originated was in a maintenance room down there. So you know that the fire has been growing enough to where it's damaged that electrical box, and now it's shut the power off. It's gotten into that electrical box and shut the power off. So they don't call 911 until afterwards. So not only do we have all these little dominoes that we talked about earlier with the weather conditions were horrible. We've got an acting captain right in the seat who was on a call coming from another call. We've got all these little things that are kind of adding up for us. So this fire's had a good chance to grow, even though somebody was actually in the basement. By the time they call the dispatch, or they call 911, you can hear on the dispatch, he's saying, the lights went out, the fire's in the basement. But we don't get that information. And like Chip was talking about, you pull up, you got fire coming or smoke coming out of the attic, and for a flue fire, guess what? You know what? You're going to be working in the attic space. You're going to be working in the second floor. And then all of a sudden now they're working in the basement. So you talk about smoke conditions. When they arrived on the scene, it's a 2-story, no big deal. Nobody's in the house, so you don't have a rescue situation. They go in the front door on the alpha side. They've got light smoke conditions. In fact, Matt, who was the first in acting company officer, says he describes it as a dry cooking fire type of smoke. So when you pull in, or when they go inside, he said there's no lights on. He said, but you can tell it's just kind of a light smoke condition, and they were looking for the basement door. So the situation that they had was a basement fire, and they were doing everything right. And the radio traffic, like Chip talks about, the incident commander does real good communication, does his own 360 and communicates everything. But what we do as firefighters is we kind of have an expectation. We go down, we put a little water on the fire, whatever, and we expect after about 20 minutes or so that everything's under control. So we got a little lackadaisical, and that's really kind of what led to all this, all these little dominoes and things stacked up for us.
So when they went in initially, did they have a line with them?
Right. Matt, the company officer, says they went in, they had those light smoke conditions. He knew he had a fire in the basement because he had done his 360. He wanted to locate the basement door. He said the basement door was closed. He was able to open it up, look. He had heavy smoke, closed the door back up, and had his jump man bringing a line in. So he waited, obviously. They got the line in the front door, got it to that basement door, and then they were able to actually, I think it was such a light smoke, I think they were putting their masks on inside the house on the first floor. It was that light of a smoke condition with the door closed. Okay. Once they opened the door, obviously, and then they advanced that 1 3/4 line into the basement to attack the fire. That's when things were allowed to progress, obviously.
Well, when they were advancing that line in, were there other companies yet on the scene, or were they just them and the incident commander on the scene? What was the staffing like, ancillary to their actions?
Typically, like when we arrive on the scene, the first in company is usually there by themselves for about a minute or so, and then because of where everybody's located, we use mutual aid. It seems like after about 5 or 6 minutes, there's a lot of folks that start showing up about the same time because they're coming from fairly equal distance.
Yeah, I can give you the time. Yeah, 1851 is when 9432 got on the scene. By 1857, there was 4 companies, a city ambulance with 2 firefighters, and a battalion chief on the scene. So within 6 minutes, you had basically 5 companies on the scene.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if the weather might have impacted that response or not.
Yeah, it did slow everybody down a little bit, but within a few minutes they were. And it's like Dan said, it's that part of town where it's kind of in the middle, so everybody's sort of racing to any given day it can be anybody's fire.
Yeah.
And one of the things that dominoes, and Dan kind of brought it up because we forgot to talk about it earlier too, and is Matt was an acting captain at the time. He's now a captain with our department. But that's and we talk a lot about it in training. That's really kind of the hardest job on the fire department because literally the day before he was riding the back step. Now today he's an acting captain. 2 days before that he was driving the truck. You're constantly that flip flopping. And when we get into the radio traffic and stuff a little bit, I mean, that's really one of the things that happens. There's multiple times where they call them to either evacuate the basement. They're calling for 20-minute accountability. You know, there's a lot of different times that they call them. And Matt will tell you, he's like, honestly, I was downstairs working as a firefighter. I wasn't taking myself out of it and stepping back as a supervisor. And, you know, I had other crews down there working, and instead of watching them work and paying attention to what was going on. And it's that situational awareness moment that he's working. He's like, I was down there, I was pulling ductwork down, I was pulling ceiling, I was doing all this stuff, and I wasn't doing my job as a supervisor, and I missed all those radio calls.
Okay. All right. So keep talking us through the first line goes down the steps. Other crews are either on the scene or really soon arriving. So keep it going from there.
Yeah. So the second in company arrives on the scene, and they actually make the decision, and it's a training issue that we talk about. It was very, very new to us at the time of the idea of transitional attack. Well, the second in company, they made the decision to take the line around to the Bravo side of the building with a second line, and flow water from the window into the basement and knock it down, keep it in check, reset the fire, and then pull back and go around. They do overall, they do a good job. It's well communicated. They tell the first in company to hold at the top of the steps. Don't go down to the basement till we're done. Once they've flown water, they go back around. The first in company goes down to the basement. They then now take the second line in and go to the top of the steps to hold the point of egress. So that part of it goes really well. Because of the lack of training at the time, things like that, you know, there's a little bit of stuff, and we, you know, unfortunately, fire dynamics, you know, you don't really know for sure, but they opened it up to a full fog. They floated water in the window for probably 2 or 3 minutes, trying to darken it down with a full fog. You know, we talk a lot about in training that we know that it doesn't push fire, but it pushes heated gases, and you're essentially reverse hydraulically ventilating the building. So, did that contribute to it? Maybe. You know, unfortunately, we don't know for sure, but there definitely ended up being fire in other places of the basement outside the room of origin. You know, past that. So obviously, it's a training issue. We fixed it since then, but at the time, it was very new, and it's another one of those dominoes that leads up to the point. So. But they come around, they hold the top of the steps to the point of egress. Matt and Scott go down to the basement. They got a good knock on the fire. Things are going okay. Once they get to the point, they start to get low on air. And they call for relief. 9542 was another company that was on the scene. They were at the top of the steps. They were helping them advance the line. They'd been assigned to that. So they're advancing the line down to the basement. At the point that they call for relief, now 9542 slides down into the basement. They take their place, and those guys come out to go change their bottles. At some point, and, you know, and we'll get into it later, at some point those guys end up going back, and, you know, they change their tanks and they end up going back in later. Unfortunately, sort of one of the first big problems that we have is there's a company assigned to the first floor for primary search. You know, which we now definitely hit hard on primary searches, not just searching for victims, especially when we know we don't have any victims, you know, in the building. Yeah, we want to do a quick primary search to make sure, but it's also opening up, checking for extension, looking for fire, things like that. And that's really one of the first big places where we made a mistake, and that moment of complacency fell in that, hey, you know, this sounds like guys are getting water on the fire. We're okay. Nobody opened up the first floor or check for extension, anything on the first floor. We know we had thermal imaging cameras in the building because we found 3 of them burnt up in the building. So we know that wasn't an issue. But it just got missed in that process.
Were they on and being used, or were they just there?
Well, we don't know. Obviously, they were so damaged, we have no idea. You know.
Well, the firefighters would, I assume you might have, along the way, had a conversation of were you using the thermal imagers?
Right. You know, sometimes I think that, you know, where they said they were using them, they said they didn't notice anything. But if we're looking at the video, because we actually have video of the interior while this was going on, and you talk about situational awareness, that was my biggest thing when I went over this, was I'm looking at, you know, what the initial company officer says is a dry cooking fire smoke when they go in there. And I'm watching the helmet cam video of the personnel that are on the first floor on Division 1 there. And I'm noticing the smoke conditions. And guys are focused on what's going on in the basement, and they're sitting at the top with the hose line holding the point of egress. And what I'm looking at is this whole thing. And because, Monday morning quarterback, whatever you want to call it, Monday morning Viking. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm noticing all the smoke conditions changing. And I'm thinking, aren't these guys paying attention to the smoke conditions? Well, they're all focused on this basement, and the conditions on the first floor are deteriorating.
Describe those conditions.
You can see, an increased amount of smoke to the point where when they walk in the front door, it's a light smoke condition. I mean, you can see everything basically with no lights on. You can see pictures on the wall. You can see on the wall. Yeah, you can see the colors of the furniture, things like that. To where 10 minutes later, you can't. They actually bring a fan in, and you can't even. The guys are putting their head down to. We'll talk about ventilation later, but they can't hardly see the color of their helmets anymore. And it's not because of the fire and the smoke coming from the basement necessarily. It's because of what's going on around them, and nobody's paying attention to that. Ventilation was a problem. We thought, hey, we got the guys in the basement call for ventilation, and we do some crazy things. But because people aren't actually looking at the entire picture and paying attention to that situational awareness, they make some errors, and it cost us, or just about really cost us.
Is the incident commander's physical location a factor in being able to see what's happening here? I assume you were more mobile than maybe the commander was, putting you in a better position. Describe that for me.
Yeah, right, exactly. When I walked up, like I said, when I was on my way there, I was thinking I'm going to turn around and go back. This sounds like this fire's out. And Chip talks about it. The incident commander is doing a very good job on the radio, and we have our tactical worksheet, correct? And he was going right down that tactical worksheet. I need my primary search. I need my second line. I need to cover my point of egress. I need to do all this stuff. And he was doing that. But we talk about closed loop communication. That wasn't, he would assign something and it wouldn't necessarily be repeated and wouldn't be completed. And he would move on to the next thing. Now, if you're listening, what is that?
Leaf blower.
Yeah, leaf blower. Okay, good. So those things were being talked about and being assigned, but they weren't necessarily being completed. So where was I at with that?
Well, we were just talking about your location compared to the commander's location.
Right. So when I show up, I'm walking, and from the radio traffic that I'm hearing and what I see when I pull up on the scene are two different things. I see a lot of smoke coming out of that front door, and I'm thinking, this fire, there's no way this thing is out. They were distracted a little bit. I could tell the crews were bringing a dog that they had found on the second floor out of the building. They were working on that, and they were asking me to grab the pet masks and things like that because they wanted to save this family's dog. Makes sense. And I said, hold on a second. I got to go run down and talk to this incident commander real fast. And I went down there and I told him, I'll be right back to help you out because this doesn't look right. And then that kind of maybe put a little bug in his ear or whatever. I went to get those masks, and about that time I started, one of the company officers had come over and said, this isn't good. He had just come out of the basement, and he said he had come out of the basement and said, this isn't what I had on the first floor. He come out of the basement, saw the heavy smoke and stuff, and when he came out, he said, this isn't what it was when I went down in the basement. Something's going on. And just about that time when we started having some fire conditions on that first floor, and things went bad in a hurry.
So
yeah, and not to get too deep in the ventilation part of it, but I think it'll kind of bring it all together a little bit. So basically what happens is that there's a point where, like Dan said, they've got a good knock on a fire. The companies in the basement call for ventilation. And this is that second piece that I told you is something that we've never done before. I promise you we won't do it again. But when they call for ventilation, the incident commander assigns a company to take a gas positive pressure fan and take it inside the building and put it at the top of the steps to pressurize the basement. We don't use positive pressure attack at all. We typically use positive pressure fans just to clear a building at the end. I'm assuming at that point, because he can't really see some of the conditions and what's going on, he does know that it's probably not time to put that fan in there yet. We still got some smoke conditions on the first floor, things like that. And that's what Dan alludes to is they bring the fan in, they put it at the top of the steps, and you see it on the video. It's that moment, and it's all the stuff that we're talking about. Is that you hear him call it out over the radio and tell him to bring a fan into the building, and you hear the guys on the video say, "What? He wants us to do what?" And they know it's not right. They're questioning it, but nobody's willing to speak up and say, "Hey, you know what, Chief? We're just not ready for that yet. Let's try a different way of ventilation." So they go ahead and they get the fan, they bring it into the building, they put it at the top of the steps, and because they know it's not right and it's not time to pressurize the basement yet, they end up trying to use the positive pressure fan as a negative pressure and set it up at the top of the steps to blow it out of the building. The problem with that is that's the moment where they open the back sliding glass doors. And, oh, by the way, we have a 17-mile-an-hour sustained wind with a 40-mile-an-hour wind gust coming directly into the Charlie side of the building, coming into that sliding glass door. So that's really the moment where you start to see the change in the smoke conditions.
Okay, I cut this interview into 3 parts, and that's the end of part 1. You're definitely going to want to listen to all 3 parts of this interview, as it contains some incredible lessons. It truly is amazing what you can learn from people who've had near misses. And speaking of that, I need a favor from you. Please. I launched this podcast to give voice to people like Chip and Dan, to people who've experienced or witnessed near-miss events. The stories that have been shared on this platform have been incredible and very educational. But we need to get those lessons shared to a larger audience. That's why I launched this podcast, to give you out there listening right now, the person who's had the near miss, I want to give you a platform to share your lessons. If you've experienced or witnessed a near miss on the job and would like to have a platform to share your lessons learned with others, contact me by visiting the SA Matters website and clicking on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage. Think about it for a moment. The lessons learned from your workplace near miss could save someone else's life. It's not hard. You're listening to Chip and Dan do it right here, and you're benefiting from their story. So step up and share yours. You'll be glad you did. It really is powerful, and what a wonderful gift that you might save someone else's life. Go to samatters.com and contact me. If you want to send me feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Just go to the SA Matters website, click that Contact Us tab, and that'll send me an email. If you prefer, you can send me a message on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And in the event we might have missed each other somewhere along the way, or if you're not connected with me on social media, recent SA Matters tour stop events have included the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, the Tennessee Safety and Health Conference in Nashville, and also did programs in Evansville, Indiana, Redmond, Washington, Lexington County, South Carolina, Chesapeake, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Topeka, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, Davis, California, Dallas, Texas, Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Australia, Perth, Australia, Wellington, New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand, and where I am now, Amsterdam, Netherlands, and where I am now in Antwerp, Belgium. When I get home next week, this international tour, I will have delivered 14 programs and been in the air for 77 hours. And I got to tell you, I'm really not as tired as I thought I was going to be after crossing 53 hours of time zone changes this month. I absolutely love what I'm doing and feel so blessed to be able to share this message with first responders, business leaders, industrial workers, medical and military personnel, and specialty trades workers throughout the world. Once I get back to the U.S., the SA Matters tour then heads on November 2 in Billings, Montana for a program for Phillips 66 Refinery, November 4 in Madison, Wisconsin, November 9 to 12 Clearwater Beach, Florida, November 16th back in Billings, Montana for another program for Phillips 66 Refinery, November 20 Boston, Massachusetts, November 30 to August 2 Evansville, Indiana, December 5th San Diego, December 7th and 8th, Niagara Falls, December 11th, Canfield, Ohio, December 12th, Wintersville, Ohio, December 13th and 14th, Solon, Ohio, evening programs, December 14th to 16th, Twinsburg, Ohio, daytime programs. And sometime in early December, my son, Cameron, and his wife, Alicia, will be expecting their first child, my first grandchild. I'm not sure I'm ready to be a grandpa yet, but everyone I've talked to that are grandpas says it really is the greatest. So I am really excited and looking forward to that. If you want to see all the locations of the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters Tour Stop events, head over to the SA Matters website, click on that blue box on the right side of the home page. The event schedule is always changing, so check back often. I'm actively booking programs now for 2018, so if you think your company or agency or association or your regional conference or state conference or your national event might want to host a program, just contact me through the SA Matters website. I have some great staff, and they'll make the entire process really easy for you, I promise. The last time I delivered programs in southwest Minnesota, I stopped by and visited the sponsor of this podcast show, Midwest Fire. Midwest Fire is a fire truck manufacturing company, and they make amazing all-poly-bodied fire apparatus, and it's changing the industry. If you haven't checked them out yet, you need to. Go to MidwestFire.com. That's MidwestFire.com. Anyhow, while I was there, I got a chance to sit down and talk to some of their employees about what separates Midwest Fire from their competitors. Let's listen in to learn what happens after the sale in the process of building a Midwest Fire truck. All right, I've heard about the No Dealer Network. I've heard about how to get in contact with Midwest Fire. I've heard about the process of speccing a truck, and that's all good. What happens after the sale?
Currently, after the sale, everything gets turned over to myself as project manager. I will then lead you through the build process. If you call in, have questions on your truck, want to make changes to your truck, want updates on your truck, that will all filter through me then rather than the salesman at that time. We take pride in everything we do here. You've heard that many times. But what we want to focus on is making this the best experience we can for the fire department. It's not always easy to get a hold of your salesman, whether he's traveling or on the road or at shows where I'm in-house full-time. Have 100% control with the project manager as well as manufacturing manager of your truck going through the process.
So somebody calls you and they have a question, or they're saying, can we make this change or whatever. You literally just walk down the hall, out the door, and you're on the manufacturing floor talking with engineering or with the people who are actually building their truck, and you can do kind of real-time problem solving or adjusting on the specification?
Yep. What we do then, if there is changes to the truck, obviously there'll be a change order involved, but the response time is a lot quicker. Most of the departments we work with have a meeting once a month, the volunteer fire departments. So if they call in, have a meeting the next night, we're able to get an answer to them, a response to them right away, so we're not holding up the project while it's in production.
Super. Well, there you have, folks. That's what differentiates Midwest Fire from their competitors. So check them out at MidwestFire.com. Thank you, Midwest Fire President Sarah Atchison, and all of your staff for your awesome commitment to improving the safety of first responders. I really appreciate your support of my mission. Hey, if you're not part of the SA Matters community of learners yet, what are you waiting on? There's over 9,000 connected here on SA Matters, sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to train employees to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Joining is free, and when you join, you'll get my monthly email newsletter that contains featured content from the blog and the podcasts. It really is the best way for us to stay in touch with each other. The easiest way to join is to text SA Matters to 22828. That's the letter S and the letter A and the word Matters, SA Matters, all one word, SA Matters, to 22828. You'll get a message back about receiving my program handouts. That's because I use the same joining code at the live events. So you'll get access to the program handouts. That way you can see what the programs are like and the information that's being shared there. And you can just consider that bonus content for signing up. If you want to get connected with me on Twitter, you can follow @RichGasaway on Twitter. You can get connected with me on LinkedIn by searching Rich Gasaway on LinkedIn. You can watch my videos on YouTube by going to the SA Matters YouTube, SA Matters TV, all one word, SA Matters TV YouTube channel. On Facebook, you can like the SA Matters page. I wonder why I've got so many platforms: the blog, the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, online academy, virtual events, books, videos, live events. Why? Because I know not everyone consumes their content the same way on the same platform, and I want to reach as many people as I can on whatever platform you prefer. Well, that's it. Episode 183 is complete. Thank you to my guests from St. Charles Fire Department, Captain Chip Ashford and Battalion Chief Dan Casey. Thank you to our awesome podcast sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to all the companies and agencies and organizations that have hosted live events. Thanks to all who attended our first virtual training event on September 26th, National Situational Awareness Day. Thank you to the more than 800 students enrolled in the SA Matters Online Academy. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners of this podcast show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of my mission, too. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.